one father, one daughter, one race against fate. When Bob Chambers abducts his daughter in a desperate bid to escape his troubled past, a harrowing road trip across New Zealand unfolds. But Bob isn't just running from the law. He's running from himself. Guided by the cryptic Sherleaf, a spirit that promises redemption, Bob must battle his inner darkness and prove he's worthy of a second chance. Pilgrim Sherleaf is a heart-pounding drama that tests the limits of love, loyalty, and redemption. Can a lost man find his way home? Dive into the gripping journey of Sherleaf today. Chapter 8. Shelter for the Night. Dusk began to fall as Bob trudged back toward the barn, his mind still reeling from his bizarre encounter with Sherleaf. The cow, or spirit, or whatever it was, had left him with more questions than answers. He shook his head, shoving the thoughts aside. Right now, his priority was getting through the night without the police, or an angry farmer. Finding them. The stolen Oranga Tamariki car sat tucked behind the barn, shielded by its weathered wooden walls. Through the window, Bob could see Mary curled up in the passenger seat, fast asleep. She looked small like that, her face relaxed in a way that made her seem younger. In sleep, she wasn't glaring at him, wasn't questioning his every move. She was just a kid. His kid. For a moment, guilt gnawed at his insides. He'd put her through hell, and he wasn't even sure if she believed he was trying to fix it. He sighed and ran a hand through his disheveled hair before quietly opening the car door. "Hey, kid," he murmured, giving her shoulder a light shake. Mary groaned, shifting but not fully waking up. 5 more minutes. Bob smirked. "Come on, sleeping beauty. We can crash for the night inside the barn." Mary opened one eye, scowling. "Do I have to? You want a proper place to stretch out? Or do you want to wake up with your legs numb? Plus, I am in pain." "I have to rest up for a while," she yawned, rubbing her eyes as she slowly climbed out of the car, shivering in the evening air. "Are we sleeping in there?" "It is somewhere safe for now," Bob said. He opened the rickety barn door, revealing erratically stacked bales of hay. This should be a decent hideout for the night. Mary eyed the structure warily. "If I find a rat in there, I'm sleeping in the car," Bob chuckled. Noted. The barn smelled of old hay, wood, and the faintest trace of livestock. Dust particles floated in the fading daylight that streamed through the gaps in the wooden walls. The place was old, but sturdy. A stack of hay bales lined one side, and various rusted farm tools hung from the walls, untouched for who knew how long. Bob closed the barn door. Not bad. "Could be worse," Mary sneezed. "Could be cleaner," Bob smirked. "Beggars can't be choosers. Come on, let's set up." They dragged a few hay bales into a rough sleeping area, layering them with an old tarp Bob found draped over a rusted wheelbarrow. It wasn't a bed, but it was better than nothing. "All right, dinner time," Bob said, digging through the plastic bag from the petrol station. He tossed Mary a sandwich and a bottle of water. She unwrapped it, sniffing suspiciously. "Tuna? It's food, ain't it?" Mary sighed but took a bite anyway. "If I die of food poisoning, I'm blaming you." Bob rolled his eyes, biting into his own sandwich. Noted. For a while they ate in silence, the distant sounds of night insects filling the barn. The wind outside rustled the trees, but otherwise the world felt oddly still. "What's the plan for tomorrow?" Mary asked between bites. Bob chewed thoughtfully. "We keep moving. Ditch the car, find something else." "The cops are looking for this one, so we need a switch," Mary swallowed. "And then what?" "Today was crazy. We can't just drive around forever." Bob hesitated. "We get to Auckland. We find your mom. I figure things out from there." Mary looked down at her sandwich. "She's not going to take you back, you know," Bob nodded slowly. "Maybe. But this isn't just about me. It's about getting the family back together. And I know that means that I have to be a better husband and father. Mary studied him, as if trying to read something deeper in his words. Finally, she nodded. "You are going to have to make big changes and prove yourself to us." Bob let out a quiet breath of relief. He wasn't sure what he expected from this trip, but for now, Mary wasn't running away from him. That was enough. After eating, they bundled up under an extra tarp they found, using loose hay as makeshift pillows. The barn creaked occasionally, but it was surprisingly warm. Mary curled up on her side, facing away from Bob while he stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. Sherleaf's words echoed in his mind. "You need to do more than just drive her to Auckland. You need to prove you can be the father she needs." Bob turned to Mary. "I never asked you before, but how is school? Are you doing okay? Are you making friends?" Mary raised her head for a moment. "It's okay, but I don't fit in there." Bob hesitated. "When we get to Auckland and find your mom, we will talk about your schooling and figure things out from there." Mary closed her weary eyes and gave no response. Bob sighed and closed his eyes. For the first time, Bob felt like he might actually have a shot at making things right with his daughter. Before the sun rises, the barn was still shrouded in darkness when Bob woke. The air was cool, carrying the scent of hay and old wood. He shifted slightly, his body protesting against the rough makeshift bedding. He pulled up his shirt to reveal the bruising on his ribs. He turned his head and saw Mary still curled under the tarp, her breathing slow and steady. Bob sat up, rubbing his face. They had to move before first light. He reached for Trisha's stolen handbag, rifling through its contents. He expected her credit card to be blocked by now, but he found an alternative: cash. He counted quickly, $160. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to get them further afield. He nudged Mary gently. "Hey, kid." "Time to move." She groaned and pulled the tarp over her head. 5 more minutes. "We don't have 5 minutes," Bob murmured. "Come on, up and at'n." Mary sighed but sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Are we okay?" "For now," Bob said, tossing her a bottle of water and a half-eaten bag of chips. "Breakfast." She wrinkled her nose. "You've got to be joking. Complain later. We need to get out of here." They left the barn behind as they cautiously drove toward Foxton. The small town was still asleep, streetlights flickering against the quiet roads. Bob knew they had to swap the car before daylight put them back on the radar. As they rolled through a quiet residential street, Bob scanned the parked cars along the curb. "We need something nondescript," he muttered. Mary raised an eyebrow. "You're going to steal a car?" Bob smirked. "Borrow. Temporarily." They passed an old beige sedan parked outside a modest single-story house, its windows dark. Bob slowed down, nodding. "That one." Mary crossed her arms in a grump. "I may never have come with you, had I known you would become a criminal." Bob parked the Toyota one house down and killed the engine. The air was crisp, the only sounds being the distant hum of the highway and the rustling of trees. He reached into the back seat, extracting a wire coat hanger that Trisha used to hang her blouse. "Stay low and keep watch." He approached the sedan, glancing around before kneeling by the driver's side door. With practiced ease, he slipped the wire coat hanger hook between the window and door panel, popping the lock within seconds. Sliding inside, he yanked off the steering column cover, exposing the ignition wires. He twisted a few together, and the engine coughed to life. Bob checked the fuel gauge. There was plenty in the tank. Mary had approached, peering in. "Wow. Should I be impressed or horrified?" Bob grinned. "Little of both." "Now get in." She hopped into the passenger seat as he backed out of the driveway, leaving the Toyota behind. The engine rumbled smoothly as they drove off down the road. "All right, kid," Bob said, exhaling. "Next stop, Auckland." Mary slumped in her seat, watching the brightening horizon. "Wow, you really are making a big effort to take me to Mother." And then after a pause, "And what about a real breakfast?" Bob pondered. "Let's see what we can do about that." Bob pulled the car over in front of a side road dairy. He looked into the back seat and found a black men's jacket and a blanket. Wearing his cap and newly acquired jacket, he entered the offbeat dairy and paid cash for pies, snacks, and bottled water. With that, they rolled out of Foxton, disappearing into the quiet morning, one step closer to Auckland. And whatever awaited them there. The roadblock. The car hummed along the highway as they left Foxton behind, the early morning sky a murky blue. Bob kept one hand tight on the wheel, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. Mary sat beside him. Her feverish appetite let loose on a warm mince pie. "You all right, kid?" Bob asked. Mary exhaled sharply. "Just trying not to think about how you're going to get caught." Bob forced a grin. "Relax. We're just two travelers on a road trip. Nothing suspicious." Mary shot him a look. "Yeah, except for the stolen car." Bob had no good response for that, so he just focused on the road. They rounded a bend and his stomach twisted into a knot. Up ahead, a police roadblock stretched across both lanes. Bob steered the car with cautious determination, his eyes scanning the road ahead. "Damn it," he exclaimed. Mary tensed and asked, "What now?" Bob swallowed hard. Turning around would be a dead giveaway. There were no side roads, no escape. "We play it cool," he said. "Let me do the talking." As they rolled closer, a uniformed officer stepped forward, raising a hand to signal them to stop. Bob took a deep breath and eased the car to a halt. The officer approached the window, his face obscured by the early morning shadows. Then he leaned in, and Bob nearly choked. It wasn't a normal officer. It was Sherleaf, but without the ethereal glow. Bob's eyes met the spirit's knowing gaze. Sherleaf was disguised in a crisp police uniform, a badge gleaming on his chest, partly covered by his white beard. His piercing eyes, however, remained the same, filled with an almost amused wisdom. "Mornin', sir," Sherleaf said, his voice calm yet laced with something deeper. "Routine check? Where you two headed?" Bob blinked, struggling to form words. North." Sherleaf gave an approving nod. "Good choice." "Beautiful drive this time of year." Mary stared, her eyes darting between Bob and the officer. She sensed something was off, but said nothing. Sherleaf straightened, tapping the car roof lightly. "All looks good here. Drive safe and take the back road when you reach Waiouru. Less traffic." Bob exhaled, gripping the wheel. Right. Thanks." Sherleaf's lips curled slightly. "I have your back, Bob. Don't mess this up." With that, he stepped away, motioning for them to move on. The other officers barely glanced in their direction as Bob nudged the car forward and rolled past the checkpoint. "Who was that?" Mary whispered. Bob swallowed. "A friend?" "A friend?" Mary asked, crossing her arms. "Who do you know up this way?" Bob hesitated. He drove as if the shadows behind him were gaining ground. He could brush it off, tell her it was nothing. But after everything, what was the point in lying? "That cop back there," he said slowly, "wasn't a cop." "That was Sherleaf." Mary frowned. "Who is Sherleaf?" Bob exhaled. "A spirit guide. He came to me when I was in a coma after the accident. Told me I had 3 days to set things right. Take you to your mom, prove I can be better, or else I don't get another chance." Mary stared at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Mary sat, her 10-year-old brain trying to process this revelation. "And you believe this? An angel is helping you?" Bob nodded. "I didn't at first. Thought I was just dreaming, but then he shows up. First as a cow, now as a cop. Giving me warnings, nudging me in the right direction. Feels pretty real now." Mary shook her head, leaning back in her seat. "You expect me to believe that you've got some supernatural babysitter making sure you don't screw up?" Bob glanced at her and sighed. "Look, it's the truth. Weird things have been happening, and every time I listen to Sherleaf, we get through, like just now." "He led us through the roadblock." "He led us through the roadblock," Mary parroted. Bob smirked. Yes, it was Sherleaf all right. And he called me Bob. Mary fell silent, staring out at the rolling fields. I don't know if I believe any of this, she admitted. But if you have a second chance, I admit you are doing something with it. Bob focused on the road ahead. Sherleaf said, I have 3 days to make things right with you and your mother. Mary gave a small, skeptical nod but said nothing else. The silence stretched between them, uneasy but not as cold as before. Bob glanced at her, then back at the road. For what it's worth, kid, I'm trying. Mary didn't look at him, but after a long pause, she muttered, I know. They drove in silence for a while. Towns blurred past. Bulls, tie-happy, until the towering presence of Mount Ruapehu loomed ahead. So, where are we? How far is it to Mother? Mary asked. Bob shifted in his seat. It's a way yet, kid. Sherleaf said to take the road behind that mountain. And I'm starting to think ignoring him would be a bad idea. She frowned but didn't argue. You really think he's helping us? But Bob turned on the car radio to soothe his nerves with some music. I believe so. Right now, I'm not taking any chances. He turned off in the village of Oyuru, heading toward the winding, lesser-known roads that snake behind the ice-clad mountain. Hey, friends. Before we jump into the next chapter, don't forget to connect with J. Pilgrim. Discover the magic, embrace the wisdom, and live the adventure. Check out the links in the description, and if you enjoy these stories, click like, subscribe, and share. It really helps this fiction channel grow. Catch you in the next episode.